Today's show, it's all about braising. Braising dates back to a time when cooks took advantage of the dying embers of their kitchen fires by tucking a covered pot filled with meat and vegetables right into the coals. Today, some of my favorite meals to prepare for guests are braised. Ossobuco gremolata is an Italian dish made of veal shanks braised in white wine, stock, and vegetables. Corned beef with vegetables isn't hard to make at home if you plan ahead. And finally, a recipe for Moroccan braised lamb shanks, flavored with star anise, saffron, cumin, and cinnamon, served with mint yogurt. It will be the hit of your next dinner party. In Italian, ossobuco means bone with a hole or pierced bone, a reference to the marrow hole that when the shanks are cut crosswise, and this is the lower part of an animal's leg, this marrow helps give a velvety, rich texture and flavor to the sauce. These are veal shanks, and ossobuco is the perfect example of how a tough cut of meat can be transformed into a meltingly tender dish. So because this is the marrow bone and this is the pierced bone full of marrow, this is the lower part of the leg of a cow. And the leg, this part, is cut crosswise, and you want 3-inch pieces of shank for ossobuco. Make sure when you ask the butcher, he ties the veal shank just like that, and try to get the bones so that they are pierced all the way through. Make sure they're dried, and you can do this with a piece of paper towel or a cloth, and dredge in seasoned flour. 1½ teaspoons of pepper, 1 tablespoon of coarse salt, and 1/3 cup of flour. This is for 4 bones, 4 beautiful shanks. And in a heavy-duty pot, this should be a very heavy-bottom stainless steel or an enameled cast iron. I find these enameled cast iron really the very, very best for braising. There, that looks good. That has to get hot. And then dredge your bone, your ossobuco, in flour, in the seasoned flour, and brown the meat on all sides, top, bottom, and all around the circumference. That's perfect. The butter gives taste. The oil keeps the butter from burning. That is a very good thing to remember when you're preparing to brown meat. Braising usually uses something from the neck, the leg, the shoulder. Those are the best cuts, sinewy kind of meat that you wouldn't necessarily use for roasting or for sautéing. It's a good way to use up inexpensive meat, although I must say ossobuco cut like this is not very inexpensive at the butchers these days. You can use pork, lamb, beef, veal. All of those meats can be braised very, very nicely. Now, for browning the meat like this and for braising, use a pot that's wide enough to hold the shanks in one layer so that they can brown, and work in batches if necessary. So here we have the meat already browning in the oil and butter. So now you can remove the shanks as they brown to a baking sheet right on your stove. Now pour off your fat. It's way, way too hot. You can wipe out your pan with some paper towels just to get the burnt bits out. And I always put my paper towel right in the grease. That goes into the garbage after it absorbs the grease. This is a good thing. You don't ever want to put that down your drain, and you don't want to just throw it into your garbage pail. So 1 tablespoon of olive oil and a tablespoon of butter. Add your onions. That's 1 cup of onion cut in a small dice. This is your mirepoix. Then your celery, 1 cup. Carrots, 1 cup. Okay, that looks really good. The juices are just starting to exude from the vegetables. Add 1 cup of stewed tomatoes. These are whole, canned, peeled tomatoes. Add 1 cup of white wine. And 4 cups of chicken stock. This could be homemade. It can be low sodium, store-bought, but use good quality ingredients. So now it's time to put the meat right back in. Now, here's another feature of braising. The meat is not totally submerged in the liquid. A little bit of the meat is generally peeking out, unlike a stew where the meat is cut into smaller pieces, using similar cuts of meat, but cut into smaller pieces, and in stewing, generally the liquid covers the meat entirely. Add your aromatics. We have a bouquet of parsley and the stems included. We have about 5 or 6 cloves of garlic, and I'm just placing those strategically around the shanks. 1 bay leaf and some basil leaves. Oh, like a handful. And that's it. Cover, transfer to a 300-degree preheated oven, and braise until the meat is tender. And for ossobuco, well, for meat about this size, it'll take approximately 3 hours. Now, are you interested to see what has happened to this beautiful meat, to our ossobuco? Look what's happened. It's reduced, the liquid has reduced tremendously. The meat is a beautiful, succulent brown. Each ossobuco has held together very nicely. Oh my gosh, I'm going to take out each shank and put it on a tray. You don't want this to fall apart because this is your presentation. The meat has reached the right consistency. When it's silky, it can be shredded easily, or when it looks like it's falling off the bone, which is exactly what's happening. The marrow is intact in the bone. You're going to eat that because it's really, really delicious. And the sauce, well, it is very delicious. Has to be separated. The herbs discarded. And let's see, here's another big piece of herb, the bay leaf. That will not puree. Just pour this into a fine sieve. Remember, this is the mirepoix that you're seeing. And the beautiful white wine, and the chicken stock, the garlic cloves. And I'm going to turn this up because the liquid has to reduce by half. And with a rubber scraper, press the liquid out of the mirepoix. So instead of discarding this, we puree it and then add it back to the sauce. Cover with a piece of foil. We're going to keep it warm. Now I'm making what's known as a gremolata. It is a zest of orange peel, just the orange part, and a zest of a lemon. And you just mix this together, season with a little bit of salt and pepper. And some people put parsley in it. I'm going to put parsley on the side. But this little zest is really, really delicious with the ossobuco. Put a little bit of pepper in. Lovely. Okay, now uncover your beautiful veal shanks. Remove that string, but I like to leave it on until I get it to the plate because these are so tender and they are so falling off the bone. Here, this one's my favorite one. And put it right in the center of your plate. Cut off the string. Gently. And spoon some of your lovely sauce. Now look at the consistency of the sauce as I ladle it onto the ossobuco. Make sure that it goes all over the veal shank. It is a wonderful sauce. And now, a little sprinkling of the gremolata, that fragrant citrus, and some of chopped parsley. Now you could serve this on a bed of risotto, but I like it just like this. Oh, and by the way, this is a marrow spoon. Serve your dish. If you have marrow spoons, a fork. It's so tender you don't need a knife. And it's hard to make a better case for braising than this Italian classic ossobuco. Enjoy. Homemade corned beef is arguably the iconic Irish dish, but I feel it deserves more attention and love than just on St. Patrick's Day. This recipe for corned beef is an anomaly. It's not quite a braise, it's somewhere between a braise and a poach. Now, corned beef really is a brisket cut of beef, which is cured in a salt brine. 1 cup of salt, ½ cup of sugar, and a slightly unusual ingredient, 1 tablespoon of pink curing salt. This salt contains a very small percentage, about 6% of sodium nitrate. To be exact, 93% of salt. Pink salt can also be referred to as cell rose or curing salt. And the reason we're using this little bit of nitrate is to prevent bacterial growth. We're going to be curing the meat for about 2 weeks. It also helps keep the meat a nice color. Curing salt has been dyed pink so that butchers can tell the difference when they're preparing meat. You don't want a lot of it, but just that little bit will help. And I'm dissolving all those ingredients in 2 quarts of water. Bring it to a boil and it will make a nice salt solution. And then in a mortar and pestle, we're going to grind up 1 teaspoon of black peppercorns, 1 teaspoon of coriander seeds, 1 teaspoon of mustard seeds, 8 whole cloves. These are common spices. Cinnamon stick. This is a pretty hard one. And 4 dried bay leaves. Oh, it smells so good when you start to crush those spices. Oh, it works very well. And if you don't have one of these, you could put it in a spice grinder. And now just add these to the water. Turn it off and cool it before you pour it over your cut of meat. And here we have a really beautiful piece of brisket. This is from the breast of the cow, and it is a really nice lean piece. And now we pour over that our brine. So this is going to stay in the brine. I like to put a piece of parchment on and 2 plates just to keep the meat underneath the liquid. You can wrap this very loosely with some plastic wrap and put in your refrigerator for 2 whole weeks, 14 days to be exact. So here's our corned beef. It's been taken out of the brine, it's been rinsed, and it's been put into a beautiful cast iron casserole, enameled cast iron, that is a perfect size to hold the meat. And now add cold water, and peel a carrot, cut it in half, a peeled onion cut in half, and a stalk of celery. And these are added to the pot. Okay, so this now goes on the stove. So now I'm going to bring this to a boil and then reduce the heat to a simmer. Cover and let cook for 3 to 3.5 hours. Now here's the meat after 3.5 hours. It does reduce in size, but it is tender and really beautiful, and it will be easy to slice if it stays here and rests. This is called tenting, a piece of parchment with a piece of foil over that. That'll keep it warm, and it will also let the beef rest. And now here We have the broth, the solids, the carrots, and the onions have been removed, and we are going to put into that broth, which is flavorful. I just tasted it. It is very good. 12 sprigs of parsley, 1 pound of red potatoes. Don't peel them. They go right into the liquid. And 1 whole head of cabbage. Now I've just trimmed the core. This is cut into wedges, and you can just place the wedges right in the liquid. So now bring this again to a boil, reduce to a simmer, and cook for about 20 minutes or 25 minutes. And then we're going to add a few more vegetables. So now the cabbage is cooked, it's nice and tender, the potatoes are tender. Add about 1 pound of white turnips. These have already been steamed separately, so they don't impart a whole lot of flavor to the broth, but they can absorb some of that flavor. And 1 pound of carrots, also steamed. So each vegetable has its own flavor, its own taste, but so pretty altogether. Now we can cut the meat. And I like to arrange the meat on a big platter like this. I like to serve the meat with grainy mustard, homemade beet horseradish. Oh, this is so good. And that's fresh horseradish, and sea salt. Nice, flaky sea salt. And here's the brisket. You always want to cut brisket against the grain. So you can use a fork if you like to hold it down, and slice the meat a little less than 1/4 of an inch thick. Use a nice sharp knife, but look at that. Isn't that beautiful? Oh my gosh, this is so great. Arrange the vegetables as artfully as you can. So you see why you need a big platter? Yes, indeed. So this is a perfect meal for 8 to 9 people, I would say. Hungry people. So serve this corned beef with a warm rye bread like this, and your condiments, and you will be a heroine or a hero. This hearty one-pot meal is so good that you'll be getting requests to make it all year long, not just on St. Patrick's Day. Enjoy. Now, this is one of my favorite dishes of all time. I have been making braised lamb shanks for, well, as long as I can remember. The aromatic spices of Morocco paired with lamb shanks, tender from braising, is one of my very, very favorite flavor combinations. And the addition of apricots and olives create a rich sauce that makes this a dish to remember. 1 onion, peeled and sliced, in about 3 tablespoons of olive oil. And get these cooking. I'm using another wonderful enameled cast iron pot, which is essential for the slow braising process. Add 1 piece of fresh ginger, very finely minced. 2 cloves of garlic, very finely minced. And secret, 1 red chili, very finely minced. And in fact, we didn't even take the seeds out of this chili. We want that spice, that heat. Lamb shanks are from the leg of the lamb. This is the lower half of the leg. These are all approximately the same size. They have been well trimmed of fat. Okay, the onions and chilies are already cooking nicely. You don't want to brown them. Add 1 carrot, peeled and cut into cubes. 2 ribs of celery, cut crosswise. A little bit of black pepper. Some coarse salt. Now we're going to add some spices. 2 teaspoons of coriander, ground. These are the spices of Morocco. 2 teaspoons of cumin, very, very fragrant and healthy. 1 teaspoon of dried oregano. Already the aromas are permeating the kitchen air. 3 star anise whole. Those can be fished out later on. 2 cinnamon sticks, another wonderful universal kind of flavor, but very good in Moroccan cooking. 2 pinches of saffron, which is the dried stigma plucked from the center of wild crocus, a beautiful purple crocus that grows in parts of the Middle East, Kashmir, and Spain for the most part. Very fragrant, and it adds a nice deep yellowy color to your food. Add 2 cans of whole plum tomatoes. Very, very delicious. Raise the heat a little bit. And 3 cups of a brown chicken stock. Now, brown chicken stock is made from the bones of the chicken that are browned in the oven before you make the stock. Everyone who likes brown stock swears by the process and really thinks it is the best. And olives. We're using about 10 black olives, a nice oil-cured olive, and a briny olive. So here, the sauce is looking good, and about 8 dried apricots cut into sort of fat slivers. Sweet, briny, salty, spicy, all the things that Moroccan cooking should be. I'm just bringing that up to a simmer, and you just, here, a little bit of salt and pepper on these lamb shanks. I like to put a little bit of pepper on the ends of the bones. I learned that from an Indian chef. And just lay this in your sauce. So during cooking, every half hour or so, just make sure that the shanks are turned so that they cook evenly. Now, it's just coming to a bubble. Cover and put into the oven. Would you like to see the lamb shanks? I think you should. They are aromatic. They are so tender, pierces easily with a fork. I like to serve these lamb shanks with couscous. They're good with rice. And I have a little bit of fluffy couscous right here, which is a very nice base for the lamb and the sauce. So beautiful. And some of this delectable, rich sauce with the carrots, the tomatoes, the olives. Sprinkle with a little parsley. And now a little dollop of yogurt flavored with mint on the side. Don't forget to sprinkle it with just a little bit of salt. And serve. Complex, rich, hearty, perfect for cool weather. I hope you've enjoyed this lesson on braising, and I'll see you on the next episode of Cooking School. Enjoy. For the most delicious Reuben sandwich, slice corned beef, butter a slice of toasted rye bread. Place buttered side down on a baking sheet. Top with corned beef and bake in a 450-degree oven. Then add sauerkraut and Swiss cheese. Return to the oven until the cheese melts. Spread the other slice of bread with spicy brown mustard. Serve warm with your favorite pickles.